Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story: I am only a mannequin. Today I am standing in my usual place between the men's coats and the children's t-shirts. They opened the shop 1 hour and 27 minutes ago, but unfortunately time does not equal customers, which can lead to a somewhat boring day for me. The customers are allowed to enter and depart the facility whenever they please, but if I had it my way I would lock every single one of them in with me. Not specifically to harm, but more so to observe. Customers always stroll by me far too quickly for me to observe. This is troubling, but what am I to do? Nothing. For I am only a mannequin. New questions, lost answers. This is all that I am ever handed. I simply cannot comprehend what it is that these customers do. Do they hunt? I do not know. Do they eat? I do not know. Do they bleed? I do not know. Do they die? I do not know. For I am only a mannequin. Customers are a strange thing. I have not seen it, but I have heard that they trade in this facility. Trading? Is this what they do? Seems quite silly, but who am I to judge, for I am only a mannequin. Apparently they choose items that they desire at the time, then take these previously mentioned items to the beings who are not customers. These beings resemble customers, but unlike regular customers they seem to be tied to this facility. They do leave, but they always come back, and the way to tell them apart from customers is by their tags. These tags all say something different. My favorite non-customer is tagged Jonathan, and he has smooth brown skin and a nice TD smile. He is always walking up and down the aisles next to me fixing shirts and coats previously unfolded by customers. Jonathan does look at me from time to time, but it is nothing more than a quick glance. I do not blame him though. I cannot move nor respond, which would lead to very boring conversations. But what am I to do? For I am only a mannequin. I do not know if Jonathan likes me or not, but it does not matter much to me. All that matters is that Jonathan keeps coming back so that I may observe. Observe. Is this my purpose? Seems quite boring, but maybe a purpose can be boring. Jonathan and the other tagged customers' purpose appears to be rather tedious and dull. Fixing customers' messes and tending to their every need. Pathetic. But I cannot help but feel pity towards them. Some of them, that is. I do not pity the one tagged Zach. Zach has taken me apart and placed me into darkness many times. I do not like it when Zach takes me apart. It doesn't hurt. I just don't like it. I do not like seeing that I am held together by screws. But every time I'm dismantled I can't help but wonder if Zach is also held together by screws. It would bring me great pleasure to dismantle Zach. I wouldn't even bother putting him back together. But I don't think that customers and tagged customers can be put back together. One time not too long ago, I happened to see a customer missing an arm. I would have offered mine, but, of course, I cannot. For I am just a mannequin. I see various types of customers. Big ones, small ones, sometimes really tall ones. But, according to my observations, this does not matter to the customers as much as one specific thing. What is this thing? It appears to be color. So far the colors I have seen of customer have been various shades of brown and cream. It does not happen often, but on occasion a couple of customers of different color who seem to be unfamiliar with each other will critique each other's character based on said color. This is strange. They are all customers, yet they still attack each other. Why? Do the colors evoke some sort of strong hatred whenever they are seen by a customer of a different color? This cannot be the answer, because most of the time the customers get along no matter what color. It makes me feel warm. Not warm like the air conditioning in the facility, but warm like a bad kind of warm. Every time I think about how foolish the customers are, it burns me on the inside. If the customers make all of these clothes that surround me in different colors, then why is it so hard for them to accept customers when they are different colors? It burns me inside, but I like this feeling of warmth. It's somehow comforting to know that these beings can make all of this stuff that surrounds me yet still not be able to come together as one. It's pleasing to my very few senses to know that while they all throw away their pleasures and privileges, I can stand in my usual place between the men's coats and the children's t-shirts and observe as their world collapses around them. It gives me joy, and why shouldn't it? It's the only thing I can do. I can only observe. For I am only a mannequin. Story, I saw something I shouldn't have. For months or so ago, suddenly people started disappearing for no apparent reason. People I didn't know and someone I did. It was all over the news, and my family was panicking. I found his computer and discovered he had a hidden link in his note app. I clicked the link, and it flashed a lot of green, and the screen filled with these weird, almost indescribable symbols that never stayed the same and just went black. It freaked the hell out of me. I showed my parents, but when I opened it, it just took me to a Google page. Later that night, I went to my room and watched TV, but I noticed my computer screen turned on even though it was in sleep mode. I freaked the hell out because I watched my mouse move across the screen, open my notepad, and it seemed as though someone copied and pasted a link in my notepad. Someone hacked my computer, and I was about to just toss it out the freaking window, but alas, curiosity killed the cat. This is where things get really, really unbelievable. I clicked the link, and the symbols showed up again, but this time they formed what looked like an image of my brother who had disappeared. It was strange because it was an image made with symbols, so it looked like a painting of a madman. But it started moving. My brother started moving. The images shifted in ways that made it clear it was live. It was almost like a filter over the screen or something. My brother said, "Why didn't I pass?" I should have passed, which shocked me because I didn't expect him to speak. I freaked out and went to grab my parents, but just before stepping out of my door, everything went black like I had sudden tunnel vision. I felt myself falling even though I couldn't see, and when I hit the ground, I wasn't in my house anymore. I was in some white room, like everything was made with bioluminescent marble or something of the like. I started to panic and spun around, but when I turned back around, there was a man, if you could even call him that. He just appeared there like someone edited reality or some shit. He was tall and lanky without literally any features, no eyes, nose, mouth, anything. He had regular clothes on, a flannel and jeans and such, but the closest comparison I can make is Slender Man. But he told me to follow him if I could. Naturally, I said fuck no and demanded an explanation, but he turned and walked anyway, saying I'd regret it if I didn't move of my own accord eventually. I didn't even understand how this thing spoke, given it had no mouth. It walked away, and my feet began to slide across the floor like I was going downhill on ice, you know. Again, like reality had been freaking edited, a door just kind of appeared. No ripples or noise or mystical shit, it literally just was there like it always had been or something. The door opened as we got close to it, and beyond that door was, the best way to explain it was everything. It's impossible to put into words, but beyond that door was up, down, forward, back, left, right, and directions that just don't exist. It sounds nuts, but it was like crossing through every conceivable and inconceivable reality but staying in this one at the same time. I saw colors that I can't explain. Literally, I've tried to, but I just can't. They were colors I've never seen. No purple mixed with red or red and green or anything ever known, they just were. It literally, and I mean literally, made me feel like my eyes were melting. I couldn't tell if my eyes were watering or if my eyes themselves were turning into liquid. Maybe either. As we stepped further, my ears began to hear things. Whispers, screams, arguments, casual talk between people, all at once like I was Superman trying to suffer through it all. I knew I had to keep walking because I couldn't stand there anymore without dying. It was like I was feeling myself growing old and young and knowing all of it at once, which kinda makes no sense, but it's impossible to explain. My brain began to pop like the information was too much. I saw stars in my vision, and I couldn't breathe, but I was still breathing from everywhere except my lungs. I took another step, and suddenly I was in the white room again, but my brother sat there on a chair. I panicked and ran to him as my brain felt released from pressure. The man spoke again as I untied my brother, and he said word for word, "Congratulations, negatives. You are thick in blood," and suddenly I was in my room again like reality was edited or I had always been there the entire time. I ran to my brother's room, and he was there on his floor but panicked as my eyes and nose were bleeding. I passed out, and I woke up in the middle of nowhere with my brother unconscious next to me. I had a brain hemorrhage and lost vision in my left eye and hearing in my right ear after I visited the ER. My parents still don't know I'm alive or my brother, and we are 5 states away with no money or anything. We want to go back but don't want to go back to that state. The doctors tried to get info on us, but we refused and ran. Not sure what to do right now because my whole concept of reality is flipped. My brother went through the same thing, but he's much smarter than me, and I guess that's why he came out better than I did. Just freaking out. Story in the abyss. Head throbbing, pain shooting everywhere in my body. Is this a dream, or am I dead? Taking a big breath in was painful. I could barely fill my lungs before the pain was shooting everywhere, feeling like million tiny daggers stabbing me right inside my muscles and bones. Focusing on moving my fingers and toes, making sure if anything was broken. Opening my eyes at first everything was dark, there wasn't anything to see. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness I could vaguely make out shapes or something in the dark. Taking a second to listen to take in where I am now, it was so quiet, it felt like I could hear my thoughts. Nothing shows any sign of life. Gathering my strength to pull my right arm from its position to start pushing myself off the ground, having every muscle of my body screaming at me to stop moving, but I didn't want to just lay here to die. When I tried to use my left arm, but when I realized it was under something I couldn't make out. When I tried to pull it out it took some strength, but I managed to get it free. Getting to my knees, looked around me, there were so many shapes in the darkness. I was in a pile of something, but I don't know what. Then something hit my nose, a horrible gross smell, as if a bag of food has been sitting out in the sun on a hot summer day. It smelled musky and horrible. I didn't even want to breathe, it was making me gag a little. Remembering I had on the jacket, I felt for the zipper to undo it, taking off the jacket to only put it on backward to use the hoodie as a mask. It cut the smell down a little, but I could at least manage. But now I didn't know what to do. I was stuck somewhere with this horrible smell and can't see hardly anything. I tried to recall how I got here, remembering where I was before this, remembering I was at a bus stop, I was going somewhere and I got a phone call. The tone was so clear in my head in this silence, as it was this ugly lame default ringtone my phone had. For some reason now I can recall and hear that tone clearly. Listening closer I was hearing that damn ringer. It wasn't in my head, there was a phone somewhere in this darkness, meaning a source of light, and hoped to contact someone. Getting to my feet I listened closely as the sound seemed to be echoing around the space I am in. Turning around I could see a dim light coming from somewhere seeming far away. Without another hesitation, I forced my body to move, stepping on the shapes I was seeing and tripping constantly as I didn't know where to step, hoping whatever is causing this ringtone to go off it didn't stop, it would stay on until I can get to it. Luck was not in my favor as the light and ringtone went off. Standing in this darkness again, I closed my eyes and prayed the ringtone would start again, my heart growing heavy as that phone could have been my one chance out of here. Feeling the hot tears swell in my eyes as I want to cry, begging for that ringtone again. Now in this silence, I took a moment to think about the shapes I was walking on, taking my left foot and moving it around until it hit something to my left, putting my foot on it. It was kind of smushy in some places, but hard in others. I didn't know what I was stepping on. As I was about to bend down to inspect whatever was under my foot, the ringtone broke the silence again. My prayers were answered without giving it a second thought. I went in the same direction, hoping it was the same phone form before. Soon the light came on, it had to be the screen, it was closer. As I got closer I could see something was covering the screen, but it was still giving enough light to locate where it was. Still heading towards it when the light was right at my feet, I dropped to my knees feeling for it. I felt the rectangle shape, it was a phone, feeling it was in some kind of cloth. My heart was racing and my hands were sweaty and shaking, trying to free this phone before the ringer stops again. But I couldn't find an opening grating to just the cloth. I shook it, hoping the phone dropped out of whatever it was. I didn't stop until I hear the plastic and concrete hitting together. Finally seeing the phone screen reading it, it was an alarm that said date with Annabella at 5. The shock of waking up in this dark hellhole was starting to wipe away as I picked up the phone and I dismissed the alarm. Seeing another person's face that I don't know on this screen, I wiped down to get the toolbar. Seeing the flashlight icon, I took a breath before hitting it as the light turned on. The worst scenes for any other human being to see was happening in front of me. Where the light touched was bodies and more bodies laying on the ground, all of them lifeless. But not a single fly or bug was down here looking at these people's faces. One girl I could see had pretty red ginger hair and beautiful green eyes. Her skin looked so warm. Still, I reached out, touching her forehead. There was still a little bit of warmth in her skin. I could feel my whole body tremble. My eyes burned with tears as my throat ached. I hate crying, I hate feeling so weak, but what else can I do? I screamed at the top of my lungs. I cried so loud, wanting anyone to hear me. If there was even a chance someone could hear me, I kept screaming, and screaming, and screaming. Story, short horror story. My body is deep in a state of rest. I could not move or hear my thoughts at all because in this state I am frozen. My body is getting all the energy recharge in the world. I don't know how many hours it has been since I go into the state of silence. I know that I rest my body around nighttime, but I don't remember the time that I fall to sleep. It was probably 6 p.m., 7 p.m., or even 8 p.m. Those are the usual time that any person would choose to rest. As my eyes are closed, I can only experience the darkness around me. Honesty, I feel nothing. It is like my body is skipping time and space as I rest. Maybe sleeping is a type of time travel or any other form of manipulating space. In sleep, a person skips time by hours or even days. Sleeping is just a state of rest, but can it be used for experiments for time travel? It is unlikely because it is just a state of being frozen. As my body freezes into the darkness of time, I feel a hand touching me. I could not move or think about what could touch me. I ignore it because probably a bug. However, if my body was resting, how could I feel something touching me? Am I asleep or somehow awake, but I don't know. My eyes are still in the darkness of space and time, and my body is not seen, but still present. I try to find out what just touched me. I try to wake myself up, but my body is frozen. I couldn't move an inch at all. My eyes open. The eyes see the darkness of the room and anything around it. I think that I am awake, but still, my body is frozen in time. I couldn't move my eyes or limbs at all. I try to move, but a force is holding my body together. An invisible force that has control of time, space, and even reality. A silent entity that lurks in the darkness of the place around time and space. My heart starts to beat heavily. My body breathes a sigh of fear. I feel the touching again, but this time it is claws. It scratches my legs. I couldn't feel it, but I know that whatever is touching my legs are pulling vines from it. Luckily, I couldn't feel the pain, but it still causes my heart to beat heavily. My left and right legs show the red soaked veins, which are cut from them. I try to look up, but my head freezes in a state of fear. My eyes look around and a figure appears. The figure stands by my head. The figure has claw-like hands. One side of its face has sharp teeth like a bear. Red liquid is on its teeth. The figure has spiders crawling out of its right arm. Its right hand has sharp teeth and red eyes. The figure looks like a girl. She looks like that she is in her late teen. The figure's body has a mouth with claws on it. Spiders, beetles, scarabs, and snakes are clawing out of her mouth. On the left side, its body looks normal. The figure has blue glowing eyes. On the left hand, it has a scare mark, which is from self-mutation. I have the look of horror on my face. The girl walks up to my arms. She pulls out her left hand and tells me to be quiet. I could not move anyway. Her claws cut into my arms. She forcibly pulls out the veins in my arms. I start to cry with the feeling of invisible pain. The girl looks at me with a smile on her face. Bugs and snakes crawl all over her eyes. She pulls out a blue and gold mask. One side of the mask is gold, while the other is blue. She puts it on my face. I try to stop her from doing it, but I could not move my body. I watch as the girl put the mask on me. I could not see what was going on. I hear the girl undressing my nightgown. I hear the cold air hits my naked body. I hear laughter around me. It sounds like a child. The sounds are all around me. I could not take it anymore. I try to force myself to wake up. I try to escape this horrible nightmare that I am experiencing. I scream with anger in my voice, "Get the fuck out of my head, you bastard," I say, but my mouth didn't move. The demand goes into my mind, instead into the monster. Every time I try to fight it, an invisible force holds me. The silent force has me under its control. I keep hearing the laughter around me. I close my eyes to put an end to the nightmare. As I did close my eyes, the world around me turns into a dark place. All the darkness is around me disappears. I begin to go back to sleep. After minutes go by, I finally open my eyes. The laughter stops and at the same time, the mask is gone. I look around and my limbs are not cut. I boost up from my bed. I stand up with a look of fear on my face. I survived whatever happened to me. I feel the sweat coming from my face. I begin to cry. What was that? Sleep paralysis? A living nightmare? What the fuck, dude? I have thought that I could have died. I am glad that I didn't die. I look up at my door. As I walk up to the door, I feel something wrong. My body starts to play the beating of my heart. I start to breathe heavily. Sweat pours down my face. I feel something is behind the door. A benevolent force is behind the door waiting for me. It could have been my mind playing a trick on me. I slowly open the door. Every cracking sound the door makes I look behind and forward. My heart is racing as I open the door. When I fully open the door, I see nothing but a dark black hallway. I look with relief as I open the door. I am happy that nothing was behind the door. I walk into the hallway to the stairs and hear something behind me. "Don't go outside," the voice sounds like my sister, Edlita. In her voice, she sounds worry and concern. I turn around and see her. She has a scared look on her face. Her clothes are dirty. She smells like trash. She has not taken a bath in several weeks. On her body are bumps and infectious cuts. They have not been treated in weeks. The bumps are on her arms and face. Red boils are covering her arms and the cuts on her legs. The cuts are healed due to weeks, but they are long and deep. They are still visible to see. It seems like a knife did that to her. I look at Edlita with confusion on my face. How did Edlita get all of these bumps, cuts, and boils on her skin? Why haven't Edlita got cleansed yet? I believe my mother or father would have cleansed her or noticed the infectious things on her body. I look at her and said, "Where is mommy and daddy or big sisters?" I ask with seriousness on my face. Edlita looks at me with nervousness. She starts to shake when she hears that question. She tries to avoid answering me. I look at her and repeat the question. When I repeat the question, she sits on the hallway floor. She tries to avoid it again. I don't know why she is avoiding the question, but I could sense in her heart something is wrong. All around me that area seems off. I just woke up from a dream where a monster was using me to this questionable setting. The house seems to have this feeling of weirdness. It might be my mind playing a trick on me, but how is Edlita's unclean? She wouldn't be unclean because I know my parents. They would never let Edlita be dirty or smell like trash. I know my parents, where are they? Maybe this is why Edlita is avoiding my question. Something might have happened to my parents. Edlita, please tell me what is going on. I have to know because I need to know what happens to our parents, I say with concern on my face. Edlita seems to freeze as I ask her that question. Her eyes look at me. She points at the door on the left side. It is my parents' room. By it, there is a door to my brother, Alex's room. The reason Bella does not have a room because she moved out a long time ago. I walk toward my parents' door. I stand in front of it. I knock on the door. There is no answer. I knock repeatedly. Every time I knock, there was no one waking up. They are probably in a deep sleep, I think. I look at the clock on the wall. The time says 2 p.m. It seems odd for my parents to be sleeping, as they have never slept at an early time. They would go to sleep at 9 p.m., it could be due to oversleeping, but even that it seems unlikely of them. They wake up at 5 a.m. to get Edlida ready for school. She has to be at school around 7 a.m. I knock one more time. When I did, nothing happens. I decide to do what no kid would ever do, go in their parents' bedroom without knocking. I never did that because they might be having sex or they do not want to be bother. I have to break this unwritten social rule to find the underlying cause of this unusual event. I twist the knob and open the door. As I open the door, it hits me. A force of an unpleasant smell attacks me. The smell is of rotten eggs and shit mixed together. Their room smells like the underground sewer system of Morgantown. I gag and choke on the smell. I throw up on the floor as the smell hits me. I cough the puke in my throat. I try to breathe for oxygen in my lungs. I look in the room for a quick peek. I see my parents. What I see makes me want to die and throw up again. My parents lay on the bed. Their faces show the expression of terror and horror. Their lifeless bodies are frozen in the pain of torture and suffering. It looks like a person may have enjoyed watching their pain and misery. Flies and maggots cover their bodies. They are eating the inside of their flesh. Maggots cover the eyes of my parents, eating and tearing away from their eye sockets. The flies are doing their jobs, which are producing more maggots for them to survive. I couldn't believe what I am seeing. The flies and maggots are surviving, but my parents are gone. I jump back with my heart beating. I enter my brother's room. I walk in and smell the horrific hellish scent. I look at my brother, Alex. He didn't suffer the same fate as my parents. His eyes are closed and his mouth has no expression. I didn't see that has happened to him, but I did see a pill bottle. I walk into the room. I fight off the scent to try to investigate the pill bottle. I hold my nose to breath. As I am walking into the room, I feel my eyes tearing up. Water comes down as I walk. The reaction of the smell is causing the moisture in my eyes to dry out. They feel like bricks in my eye sockets. I grab the pill bottle. I run out of the room. I yell in pain as my eyes are burning. The stone brick feeling causes my eyes to ignite in pain. I try to blink to get moisture, but it was hard. My eyelids could not automatically blink. My body is urging me to not blink because it will hurt. I hold on to the stair railings. I force my eyelids to close. As they close, the pain registers in my body. It feels like my brain explodes. My head rings like an atomic bomb explosion. I yell in pain and suffering. My eyes start to get moisture. My eyes are back to normal. My head still feels like a war site. I look at the pill bottle. The label reads cyanide. It makes sense. It could be the only pill to be able to kill a person quickly. My parents must have put the pill into Alex's mouth during sleep. Then, they must have killed themselves. It must have been murder-suicide. That does not make sense. Why would my parents murder my brother? They are not murderers. They love us. They would never do that. Why is Edlida still alive? Why did my parents not sneak into my room and kill me? Did my sister survive the killing, or did she murder all of them? My sister would never murder her loved ones. I look at the bodies. I notice something. What I learned from a mystery movie, there has to be a killer. By the look of my parents' faces, they could not be the killers. Someone killed them. My brother, Alex, must have been killed first. The reason I believe he was killed first is due to the layout of the rooms. His room was the first door at the top of the stairs. In addition, if the killer or killers killed my parents first, he or she would alert one of my parents, thus making the killing loud, not quiet. I look at my sister and say, "Who did this? Do you remember?" As I say that, she points toward the radio and looks at it. I look at it, and I see the power button and turn it on. When I turn it on, I hear a woman voice. She is a reporter of some local news anchor. I also hear helicopters flying and gunfire. The reporter says on the radio, "Today's news, it has been 2 weeks since a prisoner by the name of Fred Bella escaped from prison and unleashed a deadly chemical on the city. It caused people around it to die. We don't know how to stop it, but Frebella had." Before the reporter can finish, I hear a sound of growling. Within seconds, I hear the reporter yells in the radio and it cuts off the connection. The radio went silent. I have a look of fear on my face. My grandmother did all of this. She caused all of this death and destruction. I knew it was a deadly chemical. I know it is possible to create a gas to kill millions. The Nazis did it to people whom they believed were inferior. How could one person manage to create a gas to kill off many people, especially since the person was in prison? I grab Edlida and carry her on my back. I walk downstairs and got in front of the door. I try to open the door, but Edlida stops me. She points toward a newspaper on the coffee table. I walk toward the coffee table and pick it up. When I pick it up, it's read "Deadly biochemicals causing humans to kill, free for all." The description of the paper is about how Fred Bella unleashes a deadly chemical, which causes people to become mind control and kill each other. Morgantown and Evanston were not the only towns affected by the deadly chemicals. The world is affected by the deadly chemical. The death toll was 800 million people and still counting. I drop the paper in fear. I look at Adilda with sadness on my face. I feel my heart breaking as I realize that my grandmother has completed her goal. She did more kills than Hitler, Stalin, and Zedong. How did she make the chemical weapon in prison? It could not be a reality. It is no possible way that she could have done this, especially in a couple of months. I have tears coming down my eyes. I did not want to cry. I wipe the tears from my eyes and open the door. My sadness turns into a complete loss for words. I look into the red skies and the burning hollow houses. I see death and destruction around me. I see the despair and misery of the deadly chemical on its victims. Their faces meet my worry eyes. Their empty and horrendous faces lay on the road of death with the others. This did not scare me because what I saw is beyond human understanding. People walking around the bodies, but their eyes are not alive. The smell of sulfur and fire cover the walking mindless people. They let out an animalistic growl. Their eyes are dark. They walk slow and long down the street. Reanimated corpses, I know it could be possible. I try to reanimate animals to create a mindless army with my chemical, but my grandmother managed to do that. The deadly chemical, was it mine? The experiment that I performed on dying animals, did my grandmother take my experimental ideas? It can't be possible because my grandmother was in prison. No, my experiment could not have caused all of this. My experiment was supposed to be used on guilty people, not innocents. My mother destroyed it. How could my grandmother copy my plan? The corpses look at my sister and me. They start to growl. Their hunger for flesh overcomes their slow walking, and they bolt at me. 12 corpses run toward me. They are yelling "Hey, hey, and hey." Me and my sister look as the walking dead bolt at us. Story: The Blaze, a short horror story. The seas did speak to Walter. Yet, he didn't wish to listen to their ominous tune. An ice-cold fear of those salty waves crept up his spine, as the fog did creep across the shore. That invisible frost lent the old man some ease. "It's merely the cold," he whispered, shivering, "nothing more." He glanced at the brick of the lighthouse and quickly got back to work. Yet, even as he reassured himself, he made nary a glance at those heavy waves. A deep gray settled over his abode, a thick blanket of lethargy that snaked up the ivory tower of the foreboding lighthouse. "Accursed thing," the keeper muttered, his voice snatched away by the waves as if starved. He spoke no louder, as if afraid to be heard by the very ocean itself. Thus, he toiled away in the midday fog, careful not to peek at those icy waves as they crashed, the heavy crests leaving foam scattered on that dreary shore. A rotten stench rose on the newfound breeze. The old man's lips trembled as he looked upon the overcast sky. A storm fast approached from the east, with it the dreaded night. A worrisome amount of gulls flew overhead, their cries of delight disconcerting as they dove into the dark depths. Something caught Walter's watchful eye as he scanned the foam cautiously. A large piece of wood emblazoned with dark lettering. His face wrought with fear, Walter rushed inside. Hours passed as he sat in silence, shivering despite a smoldering fire in front of him. He poked at it restlessly as his teeth chattered. Every creak that shattered the silence earned a quick survey of the small room he was sequestered in. A suffocating anxiety plagued Walter, made much worse by the sudden crack of lightning. He flinched and his lips turned up into a grimace as the rain began pattering on his feeble house. That awful feeling persisted, and hung in the air as the last needles of sunlight were swallowed by the gray of the clouds and sea. With a shaky breath he drummed his fingers on his wooden chair, mulling over his yet-to-be-had arduous journey. Chest rising and falling rapidly, he muttered 47 steps. The second and 37th squeak. Mustn't make a sound. He repeated his nightly mantra until the words were seared upon memory. The fear somewhat abetted by the cauterization of that chant, he stood, eyes hardened and knuckles whitening. With a gaunt face he snatched a coat and made his way out the door. Quick steps were drowned out by the immense downpour. Scurrying towards that formidable structure, he pulled the cloak tighter to shield himself from the chill. A flash of lightning illuminated the waves as Walter made haste. Barely containing a cry of fear, he sprinted as fast as his knobbly knees could carry him. Throwing open a slippery old door, he bolted inside as if the eyes of the sea were focused on the pathetic man. His heating pants broke the quiet of the room as his eyes darted around, wildly scanning the dark. Not nearly satisfied that he was alone, but with little time to waste, he began his careful, tedious ascent. 47 steps. The second and 37th squeak. Complete and utter darkness wrapped around him as he tentatively touched his gnarled old boot on the first step. 1, he said so inaudibly it perhaps didn't actually make a sound, but it thundered through Walter's mind, a roaring crackle. He reached his foot over the second and touched the third. 3. This continued for some time until the last blessed step came. Despite the chill in the air, the grizzled old man was covered in a sheen of salty moisture. He was unsure if it was sweat or tears. At last he stood before a simple wooden door. Yet, the man's terror had his heart in a firm embrace. He knew what agony awaited. Eyes glazed with fear, pupils dilated so that the earthy brown was swallowed whole by inky blackness. Walter slowly raised a shaky hand, pushing open the door. Pale tapestries of moonlight danced around him, reflecting off the glass of the lighthouse. An eerie silence descended, prevailing over the relentless storm. Fumbling in his trousers, he pulled a matchbook free. Hands quivering, he held them with a terrible fear. As if striking them were an evil deed. Holding one aloft, he brought it down with a whimper. A sharp hiss followed as a ghostly orange light barely held down the pressure of the dark. "Please," he said with trembling lips, his voice barely penetrating the quiet. He threw the match in the oil. It twirled in the air, small circles of light glinting over every surface. Not a moment later the match's flame touched the oil. A great fire erupted as he leapt towards the floor, glancing towards that obsidian tide, revealed only by that hellfire. Hundreds of ghastly faces stared back from beneath the waves, welcoming him to their cold embrace. They seemed to dance in the tide, unaffected by their shredded bodies. "No," he shrieked in fright, trembling as the corpses called. "Please. "Forgive me," he wailed as he doused the fire and curled up on the floor, whimpering pitifully. He lay there shaking and sobbing in shame. The storm could not drown out the brutal screams and crashes as the starving sea pulled more unlucky to their domain. Story: The Forgotten Shadows. Open with eerie, unsettling music and a dark, gloomy background of an old, abandoned house. Introduce the protagonist, Emily, a curious urban explorer with a passion for uncovering hidden histories. Emily hears rumors about the old Rayburn house on the outskirts of town. The locals say it's haunted, but Emily doesn't believe in ghosts. She decides to explore the house, hoping to find some interesting artifacts or hidden stories. Emily approaches the house at dusk, capturing the decaying exterior with her camera. As she steps inside, the door creaks loudly, and a chill runs down her spine. The air is thick with dust, and the floorboards groan under her weight. While exploring the main hall, Emily finds an old, dusty photo album. She flips through the pages, seeing pictures of a happy family. Suddenly, she hears footsteps behind her. She turns around, but no one is there. Her heartbeat quickens, but she dismisses it as her imagination. Emily ventures deeper into the house. She hears whispers echoing through the halls and sees shadows moving in her peripheral vision. She tries to rationalize these occurrences, but feels an increasing sense of dread. She finds a door leading to the basement. Despite her fear, curiosity drives her to descend the creaky stairs. The basement is dark and damp, filled with old furniture and broken toys. She feels a cold breath on her neck and turns around to see a ghostly figure of a little girl staring at her. The ghostly girl points to an old trunk in the corner. Emily opens it to find newspaper clippings about the Rayburn family. They reveal a tragic story of a fire that killed the entire family, except for the little girl who went missing and was never found. Emily realizes that the ghost is the missing girl, seeking closure. Emily tries to leave the basement, but the door slams shut. The whispers grow louder, and the shadows close in on her. She understands that the spirits of the house are not malevolent, they are trapped, reliving their tragic fate. She promises to help them find peace. With the ghostly girl's help, Emily finds a hidden diary in the trunk. The diary details the family's final moments and the girl's escape plan that failed. Emily takes the diary and manages to open the basement door. As she exits the house, the spirits seem to fade, finally at peace. Emily leaves the Rayburn house, vowing to tell the world their story. She publishes her findings, and the house becomes a memorial for the Rayburn family. The video ends with Emily looking back at the house, now at peace, and a message about the importance of remembering and honoring the past. Story: Barn Loft Horror Story. I stopped counting the days after I got around 15. I would have kept going, but I couldn't. I had lost all hope. We stopped wondering if jumping down to escape was an option after watching two boys try to make a break for it. They injured their legs so bad, they couldn't get up, and we watched him drag them away from our sight. We didn't see them again. One by one, the companions I had made came and went, until some of them stopped coming back to the loft altogether. They had been there longer than me, but I knew my time to go where they went was coming soon. Whenever I heard his ladder clang against the loft, I panicked, only remembering to breathe when I wasn't next. Normally when the ones who were taken came back, they never said anything more than a few mutters about experiments. They stayed like that, unmoving, barely talking, until they were taken down again. One girl was able to tell a bit more about what had happened. He would take them into a room that looked almost like one at a hospital, strap them down onto a table, and put an IV into their veins, which coursed an unknown substance into them. He said it would change them. There was more she wasn't telling us, and I couldn't tell if she'd stopped talking because she couldn't remember or just didn't want to relive it. We never knew his motive until it was evident that a couple who had come back had noticeably changed. The look in their eyes was wilder, they moved in awkward, jerky movements, they weren't human anymore. The rest of us stayed far away from them for as long as we could, unsure of the better option, becoming them or disappearing forever. We didn't have a choice, but the thought of one or the other was almost as terrifying as our situation. It wasn't hard to pick up on his schedule. He might have been mad, but he was methodical. The plan was to wait for him to leave with his tray of tools, none of which I recognized. He always took a long time to clean them. We didn't know exactly where that was, only that it was outside the barn. I didn't know whether to be anxious or flattered that he took the time to clean them up before using them on his next experiment. After he had left with the tray, we were to crawl out the hole in the wall where multiple kids had unknowingly teamed up to tear away at the old boards of the wall when he wasn't there. It wasn't very noticeable on the inside, because we'd just put the boards in front of the hole and hide it. Even though he kept us in a loft, making it so we couldn't jump down on the inside, the outside proved to be easier. Through the hole, we were able to see a small roof right there that we would be able to get on to use to get onto the ground. I wasn't as optimistic as everyone else. I had almost started to look forward to my turn with him and wanted to know what would happen. I was still terrified of him, though. I saw what the stuff did in the IV did to the others before they were killed or turned into a mutant. It wasn't something to look forward to, but what else was I supposed to hope for when escape hadn't been an option? When the time came to execute our plan, I may have actually felt a twinge of optimism, though I found myself saying it wasn't going to work. But, after all that time of being here, watching everyone around me disappear, maybe I was finally getting out. We uncovered the hole and the first person went through. Everything was going as well as it could. Until that first person on the outside fell through the roof we were supposed to get on. In a panic, someone else went out, too, maybe to see if it was possible to avoid falling through as well. They didn't and managed to lower themselves enough to safely jump onto the ground. This gave the rest of us hope. However, the crash of someone falling through the roof had not gone unnoticed. He was back inside now, yelling. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I didn't need to. I was buzzing with so many thoughts and feelings, my blood turned cold as I realized this may not work. The sound of his footsteps urged us to get on with the next kid's escape. The clang of his ladder caused us to scramble to get through the hole before he could make it up there. I got through and saw the opening in the roof that had been left from the first escapee. It was barely avoidable, but the ones who went out before me had went around it and made it to the ground. I could, too. All I had to do was lower myself onto the ground. Even though they could have already run off, the ones who had made it out first waited, arms open, ready to catch me. It all happened so fast. I was pushed before I could figure out how to get down fast enough without hurting myself. I fell onto the people below me and someone else fell on top of me. It just had to be one of the mutants who had pushed me, now crushing me between them and the people underneath me. We were disoriented, the sunlight was blinding and the sounds of nature suddenly around us overwhelming. Our limbs were a tangled mess. I couldn't tell my arms and legs from the people I landed on or the mutant kid weighing down on me. I heard words of praise and the mutant's weight lifted from my body. I thought we were free until I saw him. He caught us before anyone could make a move to get up. Story, beginning of the end horror story. My name is Jonas, and this is the story of how I survived the Great War of the 21st year. This is the story of my scars from the front lines. Born in the year 99, I was born under the name Josiah M. Springfield. My mother worked as a carpenter, and my father, well, I didn't see him much, but I heard strange stories about his adventures. Some said he was a pirate working off the coast of Florida. Others said he was a document repairman in a place called a material yard working on some secret project. Many people found and entered his garage, however, anyone who entered never came out again. I myself worked in a few different places where I was able to find work, because the war was going on. Jobs were very scarce, as were fuel and other necessities. Luckily I didn't drive and I run everywhere or ride my bike, which means I'm often bullied by people for not knowing how to drive. But this means that if I need to, I can run about 5 miles without getting tired because I'm not lazy and I'm extremely active. However, because of my strength, I was often beaten a lot, with them saying run faster than this girl, and sometimes they still do that because I'm weak. Like a cruel game, they signed me up for the 8th year of bombing, because they know the physical wound will heal, but the wound never leaves you, you will never forget the pain horror of war. But, it was my sense of rightness that kept me going, and my epiphany. That would be the key to keeping me alive, amid the most hysteria since the early 2-wave years. Everything went well until one day, while eating breakfast, I received a letter and was assigned to the 580th Air Force under the sole command of Lieutenant Leaf. The war against the so-called furries was going terribly wrong, with bombing raids taking place in the skies every night over the small town of Handleton with a population estimated to be the size of an average football stadium. They liked to tokenize people. They used history as inspiration for their intimidation, mainly with documentaries about World War II. Using blueprints, they recreated old fighters with improvements they made perfect. Despite being intelligent furry people, they are easily distracted by something shiny. This was their main method against them until they created an injection that could transcend all dimensions, and all the ability to create them is distracted. I was assigned to a bomber crew of 25 people, and the plane was called Lucky 13. I was given badges and ordered to bomb 2 major cities with the crew, 2 cities which are called Owatan and Fur City. 2 hours passed and we were flying over the city of Owatan. The first commander in the drive shouted at us, "That's right, you worm. I want to see these bombs fall on this city so much that it hurts. I don't want to see a single inch of it left. Give these furries their own damn medicine. What do you say?" Everyone responded with a quick "Gura." As soon as the bombs began falling silently to the people and the giggles of the monstrous crew members were heard, the whirlwind of chaos broke out. Although on the bomber it was also easy to find one by one running to safety, even though it was almost architectural, when a nest was found and then, again, heard that cry and then said, Commander Look came back at us with unbelievable beaked faces, shouting at us I'd fly down there and finish the job. You good-for-nothings get down there and finish them off, and if I hear one of you, if that hairy bastard is saved, I will send the machine to an honorable military court. One by one, the men jumped out of the plane in perfect synchronization, chanting military tunes to stimulate themselves, until there was only one left. Me, and then there was the unmistakable sound of 300 caliber bullets stretching out the sides and the engine of Lucky 13, and it was now or never. I had to jump or I would die. I would know error. I prayed to God above and jumped out the back, and everything slowed down and started to almost stop. Is this where I die? I heard the noise of the terrifying Hyena Mk2 coming in above me. The propeller almost grazed my head, or 5 meters not far behind the Hyena was the famous Wasp Mk3. Both of these aircraft were 2 of the most fearsome aircraft models ever built by the Ardvakian military. Not far behind is the heavy cruiser Sea Serpent, weighing about 100 years, the most powerful and powerful. As pure as one can make by hand. As I continued to fall, watching my life flash before my eyes and the wind rustling my hair and passing through my ears, I heard a faint, yet distinct, distant call, "He once." Again I heard what sounded like a woman's voice. "Hey you idiot, you will destroy the cement. Hey. What the hell, get them out." I woke up to find myself less than 200 meters above the ground and continuously rushing towards the ground, and I pulled my parachute at just the right moment. Fear and anxiety paralyzed me as I pulled it. My knees. I comforted the house with a tremendous force, and I heard a tremendous pull and a sharp pain in both knees. The parachute pulled me through the roof. The pain was unimaginable. Finally, I slid down the house and hit the ground. I hit my head on the flower pot and felt myself being pulled inside. As I felt myself being pulled into this stranger's house, I could feel them struggling with the weight of my still body being pulled through the door, the occasional light coming on underneath. My closed eyes, blinking at an uneven pace, I placed on a certain bed. There was a strong smell, something I had never smelled before. I almost thought I had dipped my head in skunk urine mixed with pig manure. I inhibited waking up and screaming. The scream was delayed from where I was fallen to my fate. My heart was faster than ever. My anxiety was at its peak. I finally woke up and I couldn't see anything. There was an incomprehensible darkness that covered my face, even though it was drawn to the darkness like a moth to a lamp. I woke up, screaming with such excitement that my vocal cords felt like they might melt. The lights flashed from the intensity, and then the unintelligible sound of a door was smashed open, not echoing throughout the room with such intensity. I had never experienced this before. Finally, after what seemed like years of deep sleep, I heard a distant, barely audible voice. "Is that you? Or not?" He didn't expect that he would wake up so early. Let me postpone the search plan. My cell door opened. It took a long time for the light to penetrate every corner of the room. It was as if the room itself was bathed in light. absorbing every particle of light into the cushioned walls, like a chocolate connoisseur enjoying every moment of it. I wished I never woke up when I saw the state of the room. Every square foot of the room was covered in blood, organs, and feces, and I realized what that smell was when I first arrived, when light finally flooded into the padded psychiatric hospital-style cell, and when my eyes finally adjusted, I saw a woman, though she wasn't quite a woman. I can't determine the type. Story: Broken Lights, a short horror story. Her breathing was wheezed. Her pacing was quick, and her focus was everywhere. Sasha's adrenaline was spiking her heart and movements in a way that shouldn't be possible. Her energy was almost endless because of it. The screams of the hostile beings running after her were loud, ear-splitting even, sounds that would render someone's throat raw if attempted to replicate. Their footsteps matched her pace, if not quicker. Feet sprinting in the grass that shuffled from theirs and her own movements. The grass surface turned to cement. Her shoes clunked against the hard surface as she ran for her life. Dodging towering metal crates and screeching monsters, her way was blocked by a looming metal warehouse. Seeing no other option, she kept her pace up for its wide-open door. Hearing one of the creatures behind her grow ever so closer, feet getting faster and louder, breathing more quickly and heavier down her neck, she dove for it. The moonlight was masked by pure darkness, her body toppling to the cement ground of indoors, her flashlight shattering on the ground. Turning to look at the open door, she threw herself up. It screamed before she threw the door closed, turning the lock. Her breathing wheezed, shuddered as she slouched forward against it, resting her forehead against the door's surface. Her breathing was so strained it was difficult to pin it between her lungs begging for air or emotions taking over, and she was on the verge of crying. Either way, she was struggling. Her legs shook in weakness, the adrenaline fading and almost begging for her to collapse. She kept herself standing, however. Looking over her shoulder, she only just now realized that the building was completely pitch black. Her mind was too originally focused on escaping with her life still intact. Diving to her knees for the flickering flashlight on the ground, she picked it up. No. No, 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 no. The glass was shattered, the light bulb inside flickering in an attempt to stay alive. She smacked its surface onto the palm of her hand in aggressive attempts. That only seemed to make it worse. With one more firm pound of it against the palm of her hand, it died. The light dimmed before the entire building shrouded her in complete darkness. Her breathing shuddered. She was completely defenseless against the Weavers. The Weavers. Human hybrid creatures of complete hostility. Broad-shouldered human beings who have succumbed to their form. Clothes ripped and tattered to almost nothing but rags. Skin a sickly pale, black bags under their glowing orange hungry eyes like goggles, hands and feet completely black like they were burned, nails so long that they could reach their knees without even bending over, ears sharp and pointed, and jaws split into arthropod-like mandibles, salivating, clicking and screeching in communication. Their motivation is unknown, and so is their origin, for what she knew. But the way they treat humans is cemented and true. Angry, hostile, and deadly. Some kill on the spot, others drag them away, never to be seen again. She was pursued by 3 of them in that chase. From the glance she got over her shoulder, 2 were male, and the other was female, easily distinguishable by their appearance and host. The people at the safe house told her it was a bad idea to go out by herself. "Sasha, you'll get yourself killed." She took it anyway. Sasha lifted her head, staring into the empty black void of the warehouse before her. Adjusting her black long hair, she reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. She opened up the camera and pointed her phone to the darkness before her. With a press of her thumb, the camera flashed. With the camera flash, the terrain was revealed to her for only a second. Towering metal shelving units with wooden crates. She hated that she could only see for a split second. She hated the dark. She doesn't fear it itself. She fears what might be hiding inside it. She fears that something would just jump out at her the moment she presses that camera button. Despite the fear growing inside of her, she pressed on. She slowly stepped further into the darkness to accomplish her quest that she started the moment she stepped out of the safe house. To find her two missing kids. It has been hours since she has last seen them since this whole problem began. A part of Sasha wanted to look for a light switch, but in reality, that would be fruitless. The town is devoid of any power. The power plant was ambushed by the weavers, the phone tower was attacked and the radio tower's cords were cut. The town is stuck in a blackout. No lights, no power, no communication to the outside world. They were isolated, and the world was completely ignorant of what this town is currently going through. Pressing the camera button on her phone again, it flashed, exposing her path for another second. She was slowly treading down a narrow hallway of towering metal shelving units. But in the end, it was hard to tell where she was going since all she could see was just a wall of darkness in her path. She pressed it again, and her heart stopped for a second. Laying on the cement ground before her in that second-long flash was a pink ribbon. She dove to her knees, shock overcoming her as she gently scooped up the pink, glistening ribbon. Her breathing shook as did her arms as she lifted the light little ribbon in her hands. Her daughter's ribbon. A ribbon fixed into a bow in the back of her head to make her hair ponytail, and here it was, laying on the ground and now clutched in her mother's hands. Lifting her head, looking forward, her heart stopped again. A shoe. A blue sneaker. Her son's sneaker. Sasha felt like she could cry. She buried her face into her daughter's ribbon, weeping for them. She could just imagine the situation they were in. Her daughter holding her brother's hand, leading him away, running, screaming, their young child's shrieks echoing in the warehouse before being caught by these monsters. She expected the worst to happen to them, and the thought would not go away. It brought tears to her eyes, water falling down her face as she sobbed into the tattered pink bow in her hands. A small part of her had a glimmer of hope. Maybe they were dropped in their escape. Maybe her bow wasn't fixed tightly to her head and unraveled off. Maybe her son's shoe slipped off during the run to safety. A choked breath jumped out of her as she lifted her head from the ribbon. Okay, she regained what little composure was left. Stay focused. With the mindset that they have escaped, she pressed on. She shambled through the darkness, occasionally pressing the camera on her phone to illuminate her way for a second. She stepped into a small opening, or at least it felt like she did. The thick air suddenly got thinner and it felt more open. Sasha shuffled forward through the dark, treading through a blanket of nothing. Her foot slipped on something wet. Her leg was thrown forward. Sasha gasped, toppling backwards. She crashed to the cement floor, the breath being knocked out of her. A groan growled from her throat as she sat up. She stared ahead to make out anything that she stepped on, but it was near impossible. Sitting up and shuffling to her knees, she lifted her phone to the floor, pointing the camera at it. With the press of a button, the camera flashed. Sasha's blood ran cold. Gore. Remnants of something tainted the floor before her. A pile of mutilated flesh, bone, and blood, rendering its shape completely unknown. Sasha flashed the light again. As if the first glance wasn't already sickening enough, the second one bore more answers. There were no traces of clothing in the fleshy mess. Instead, remnants of torn and ripped fur, which could mean it was an animal. An animal, sure, but as for what kind was completely beyond her. It was too messy, mangled, and bloody to tell. Movement caught her attention in front of her. Sasha's breathing spiked as she lifted her chin. For the time she has been in the dark warehouse, her eyes seemed to have adjusted ever so slightly. In her vision, she could make out two shelving units side by side. One of them shook. Sasha's breathing shuddered as she stood up. She stared at the wall of darkness in front of her. A low, gurgling, croaking noise filled the dead silence in the warehouse. Sasha slowly lifted her phone, pointing it at the darkness before her. Her arm shuddered as she did. A whimper came out of her as she bit the bottom of her lip. She pressed the camera button on her phone. The camera flashed. The weaver shrieked. Sasha screamed, the male creature shielding its eyes from the blinding flash of the camera light. Her feet reacted, attempting to back her away from the hostile creature. The humanoid creature strained a scream back, pouncing from its narrow space between shelving units onto her. She was forced to the ground as it straddled on top of her. Sasha struggled as the creature pinned her to the floor. A shriek left its throat and passed the 4 large mandibles of teeth in its mouth. She threw her arms into directions, but it kept a firm grip on them to keep her still. Its alive eyes narrowed inside the black bags under them as a strained noise left its throat, its salivating tongue flinging out of its mouth for a quick moment. It lurched its head forward. A blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the warehouse from the poor victim as the sharp teeth punctured the flesh of her neck. Story: Doctor didn't believe me. After reading several medical horror stories on here, it's no small wonder I hate going for anything medical. I thought I'd like to share my story. My experience is small potatoes compared to the rest, but here goes. Around late March of 2017, my right wrist was feeling particularly sore for several days. I bought a wrist brace and wore it during work, because at the time I had a job that required a lot of heavy lifting, upwards of 60 pounds. I favored my right wrist, overcompensating by using my left hand to bear the brunt of the weight whenever I could. My right wrist eventually healed over the course of a month or so. My self-diagnosis was that it was tendinitis. Unfortunately, the exertion on my left for the prolonged period caused severe tendinitis in my left wrist. In early May, I noticed the first symptoms. Again, I bought a wrist brace and lessened the load. Unlike with my right, my left was not improving. It worsened to the point that I had very limited movement of my wrist. Any accidental pressure or bumping of 2 of the tendons in my wrist, the ones leading up the thumb, resulted in terrible pain. By mid-July, knowing that my wrist should not still be in so much pain, I finally went to urgent care. The doctor examined my wrist and sent me on my way with a low-grade prescription painkiller. I took most of that medication over the course of the next 2 weeks and it did nothing. Finding that the treatment I was given had been useless, I didn't feel confident seeking further treatment. Even though my wrist was in pain, this was mostly typical if I moved, bent my wrist or accidentally bumped it. For nearly 3 more months I dealt with it. By October, my wrist had gradually worsened that it was constantly sore, at best, or leaving me in excruciating pain with tears rolling down my face and unable to use my left hand for up to an hour. In fact, my wrist felt as though it had locked up. I could barely flex my wrist at all by this point. I was barely using my left hand at all anyway, just to avoid causing pain. Finally, I booked an appointment with the local poor man's clinic that I was registered at the time. I go in for my appointment and after 20 minutes of waiting in the exam room, a doctor finally comes in. I explained to her my symptoms and for how long, telling her specifically that I physically cannot flex my wrist beyond a small degree and that attempting to do so causes tremendous pain. I also told her of my failed previous treatment. Her response? "You're just babying it," she says. Then, without hesitation, and as if to prove her point, she grabs my left arm in one hand and my left hand in her other, and rapidly torqued my wrist in a few directions before I yanked my wrist out of her grasp. Cradling my wounded appendage and with tears streaming down my face, she looked at me with an "oh shit" expression and told me very hurriedly that she is going to prescribe to me a muscle relaxer and a stronger pain reliever. I left the clinic and headed to the nearby pharmacy to get my prescriptions. While I'm waiting for them to be filled, still very sore from her manhandling, I kept thinking over what had just happened. Why didn't she believe me at first? Why had she been so aggressive to prove that my symptoms were nothing? Then it occurred to me that she likely suspected me of simply making up my injury in order to score some painkillers. My instant reaction to her examination made her realize very quickly how wrong she was. Over the next few days, I took both medications. Despite the relief from the pain, they left me feeling violently ill. After 4 days, I stopped taking them completely. Yes, I 100% wanted painkillers for my alleged addiction. Surprisingly, this doctor called me 2 days after I had stopped taking the meds to follow up with me. I admitted to her that I had stopped and why. She then prescribed to me an anti-nausea medication and told me to resume the other meds. I did as I was told. The pain subsided, though not completely, and my wrist remained stiff. That is, until nearly 2 weeks later. With the pain no longer at the forefront of my mind, I just happened to flex my wrist a little bit. I felt and heard a loud snap in my wrist. It didn't hurt at all, but there was a definite change for the better. It was as if 60% of the pressure in my wrist was suddenly gone and I had reclaimed some of my flexibility. I felt a great deal of emotional relief. A few days and a second snap later resulted in my complete recovery. Unfortunately, this experience has forever left me distrustful of the US healthcare system. I am wary of the day that I will have to rely on it. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.